response. This is another Libertarian with Sam Seder.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Folks, on the phone, it is a pleasure to welcome the 19th and current chair of the Libertarian National Committee, Nicholas Sarwok. Nicholas, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on, Sam.
So, all right, will you just tell folks, what do you do as the chair of the Libertarian National Committee? Are you like the party head?
Yeah, it's the same position as the chairs of the Republican or Democratic National Committees. So you're the chair of the national organization of the party that controls, the national finances, has a national headquarters, coordinates ballot access, party stuff.
Okay, and so now, all right, so let's get some of the mechanics out of the way here. If I was to run in the Libertarian primary, how would I go about doing that? Is it too late?
Well, it's not too late. We nominate by convention still. So Libertarian politics is still real and not as made up and kabuki as the two old parties.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have to go around to state conventions all around the country. We're organized in all 50 states, and convince people who are going to be delegates to our national convention held next May in Austin to vote for you at that convention. We don't do binding primaries in the various states. Those are just advisory, or beauty contests.
Could I lobby these potential delegates, by phone, by mail, in other forums?
Yeah, I mean, it's standard political campaigning. The only difference is you're not trying to get votes on a state-sponsored primary election day. You're trying to convince activists who are going to be delegates to the national convention that you would be the best standard bearer for the Libertarian Party in 2020.
Are there going to be debates?
There are debates already happening among the candidates who are seeking the nomination. Usually those are at state party conventions around the country. There are some online debates that have happened. One of the things that I've noticed is everybody's really focused on the 37 people who are running for the Democratic nomination right now. So that's eating a lot of the oxygen in the room.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry about that. By all means, send if you have video of the debates, send them to us, because I'm upset that we have not seen them. Who has been debating? Who are some of the top Libertarian candidates at the moment? Is Kokesh in there?
So right now, Kokesh is in there. There's Adam Kokesh, there's Arvin Vohra, there's Kim Ruff, there's Vermin Supreme, Daniel Taxation is Steph Berman, and then there's a number of other people who are rumored to be considering running and haven't decided to run yet because we are still, almost a year out from the convention in Austin.
Okay. All right. So we've got those mechanics down. I'm not sure. What do you think my chances would be in the, to run, if I was going to run?
Every time we have a national convention, the delegates are going to balance between who is closest to the Libertarian platform and, in their beliefs, and who is likely to have the largest megaphone if they go out and get the most credibility and earn the most votes. So where do you fall on how much of the Libertarian platform you agree with?
Well, that's the thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I'm not sure I'm fully aware of what the platform is, but to the extent that I am aware of it, I have a feeling not much. Now, I wanted to talk to you about
that might be a tough run for you.
Well, but I got to say, as popular as Vermin Supreme is, I may have a bigger platform, right? I could probably get on MSNBC as a Libertarian candidate in a way that, I understand Gary Johnson had that, but so far I don't see any big names out there who are going to be able to do this.
Yeah, the field is fairly open right now, but the question is going to be, why should a Libertarian delegate want you up on that stage if what you're going to say is, well, I don't really agree with my party on anything, but look at me, I'm on TV.
All right, well,
sell that for my delegates.
Fair enough.
Okay, this is an actual problem with the Libertarian Party. Like, legitimately, this is why the Mises Caucus broke off and all the drama inside the LP right now, which, thank God, but the party, there are a lot of libertarians, but they generally vote Democrat or Republican and not Libertarian Party, because the Libertarian Party is solely focused on winning elections. So what Sam Seder is saying right now is a legitimate argument you would expect from the Libertarian Party. It's just kind of ridiculous. They stand for nothing, hold no values. Now the Mises Caucus is a bit different, but we'll see how that plays out. The old party people are suing the Mises Caucus too.
But you got to give me some credit, Nicholas, because I'm not going to. That's the way I'm going to approach it. I'm going to try and convince the folks in the party that there's some policies that need to be changed. Probably most of them. Not, I think on a foreign policy perspective, I think we're fairly close. I'm not sure. At least top line, it looks like we're close. Obviously, I'm for.
You don't support foreign wars and getting involved in other countries' civil wars, bombing Yemen, things like that.
Indeed. So I think we've got we're aligned there. I think on decriminalization and legalization of drugs, I think we're fairly aligned. I'm guessing. I don't know.
So you don't want to keep the racist war on drugs going. You want to stop that.
That's correct.
Okay. So we're good on those two. We got two.
Now it gets a little trickier. Where are you guys on single-payer healthcare?
Do you think the government has been really good at doing things efficiently with your money?
Yes.
Okay.
Relative to
All right.
relative to what? Like Verizon?
I mean, what do you see as the quality of the single-payer systems that we have now? Either the VA, Medicare, Medicaid, do those produce high-quality healthcare?
The VA is actually not just a single payer. VA is actually full-on socialized medicine, right? That we provide.
Right. How's that going?
It's going actually. If you look at the surveys of people who use the VA, in
The ones who
terms
didn't kill themselves.
Do you suffer from anxiety, feeling irritable or moody, forgetting little?
Okay, so the VA does not have good outcomes. It's pretty shitty coverage. Let's see if we can find something. Well, here. So this is titled VA finds care equal or better than private sector. In tally of 83 different measures covering a variety of types of care, including safety and effectiveness of treatment, the quality of the... it says it exceeded, but I think this is bullshit. I've seen things to the opposite. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find them right now. Let's see. I mean, maybe it's not as bad as I thought. Maybe it is better. So, anyway, this is not the meat of the argument. But let's see how they stack up with cost. So, okay, here you go. The VA's healthcare costs are considerably higher than could be purchased in the private sector. The VA should consider outsourcing inpatient services to higher performance private sector hospitals. The VA's healthcare costs are considerably higher. But then Herc is saying that they are not higher. So yeah, here's PubMed, and results. The cohort comprised 334 patients, 170 patients in the VA dialysis group, and 164 patients in the private sector group. The VA dialysis group had more comorbidities at baseline, outpatient emergency visits, prescriptions, and longer hospital stays. They also had more conservative anemia management and lower baseline urea reduction ratio. In adjusted analysis, the VA dialysis group had $36,431 higher costs than those in the private sector dialysis group. Okay, but this isn't the argument that I would ever make. The argument that I would make against what Sam Seder is saying is that the current system that we have right now, this quasi-government controlled private market, literally is like the worst of both worlds. You have all the government controls and market disruptions that you would have in a socialized system, but you don't have the benefit of the socialized system, which would be cost reduction. So it's just like everything else that the government gets its hands involved in. So after World War II, the top marginal tax rate was really high. And so what they did was everyone started trying to think of ways to have benefits that weren't on your paycheck so that they wouldn't get taxed. Everyone was looking for tax deductions. So you had imports of like crazy expensive desks and all kinds of stupid shit that could be considered a business expense because everyone was trying to save in those taxes. And so we created these like government-controlled, districted insurance companies that don't have to compete against each other. And we basically had people started having them cover everything. And when I mean everything, I'm sure everyone listening to the stream knows, like your insurance pays for everything. You bring your insurance for a checkup, you bring your insurance, anytime you do anything related to healthcare, it's not insurance, right? You don't buy car insurance and then give your insurance when you go get gas or when you go get a car wash. That's not how it works. You buy your auto insurance in case you get in an accident, but we don't buy medical insurance in case we get cancer or we get some kind of real, in case we have a heart attack or something. That's not what it's there for at this point. At this point, we've put all medical costs under our health insurance system, and our health insurance system is heavily government controlled. And so you end up with just a worse of both worlds system that is really pathetic and really expensive. So honestly, I would probably prefer a socialized system over what we have now. It'd probably be cheaper. You'd really do some damage to research. I mean, we are like the only country with a profit incentive for medical research, and we do basically all of it. But also, I don't want to pay for the entire world's medical research. Like, how about let's socialize our system and stop paying for the whole world's medical research and let them, pick up the slack. But when you look at medical items that are not covered by our wacko insurance scheme, they get unbelievably less expensive over time and more accessible. Just like everything else that doesn't have government interference, just like your cell phones, your TVs, your computer monitors, your all, anything that doesn't have the government hand distorting the market gets cheaper and more accessible over time. Like it's a naturally deflationary economy. And so I think the best way to go would be to have an actual free market. Maybe you keep catastrophic medical insurance. Maybe you socialize catastrophic medical care. But for private care, if I have a stomach ache, and I don't know if it's pancreatitis, and I need to get it checked out, it's been going on a couple days. I'm like, I need to go get this looked at. I should be able to call 4 places and find out what it costs. You can't do that in our system. Like you cannot get pricing in our current medical system. So I mean, it's not a private market medical system. It's a socialized system with a couple of people who get to become obscenely wealthy off of it, but it's not private in any sense of the word. It's not a free market. So that's the actual argument that I would give.
That's right. That's right. There's a lot of people who come back from wars and have PTSD. That's why, if we go back to the first plank that we agree upon, that's another one of the reasons why we don't want to send people to war. I mean, right, that the people who get treated by the VA have the singularly most most complicated cohort of people to treat because they are sustaining injuries that doctors and who are civilian doctors who just don't come across. They just don't have any experience in it. Medicine for people who've gone through war is a radically different animal in many respects. And so the VA, if you look at satisfaction surveys of the VA, overall, they're competitive, if not better, than private hospitals. If you look at polling on Medicare, people love Medicare. They love it. And people on Medicaid actually love it, but they don't.
I asked about how it works.
Well, how would you assess how it works beyond whether the patients are happy with it?
Cost for outcomes is usually the way that most policy I've seen works.
Well, then you know that Medicaid costs almost 20 cents less a dollar than private insurance does in terms of delivering the exact same.
Yeah, but no doctors accept it. So this is kind of a phony argument. Like very few doctors accept Medicaid. So you have a very constricted number of places you can go for your medical care if you're on Medicaid. And if everyone went on to Medicaid, you couldn't continue to have a very small group of doctors that accept it because they would have to treat everybody.
Services. And then, in fact, you also probably know that when private insurance decides on trying to figure out what is the most effective treatment for different things and what they'll cover, they look to Medicare for that data because Medicare is the only one that collects all that data and has enough of a pool in which to assess it. So by both those measures, Medicare is doing great.
That does not comport with the lived experience of Medicare recipients. But
wait, I thought we just said...
If you wanted to talk about polling, that's fine.
When you say comport with the lived experience of Medicare recipients, wouldn't we be able to use polls to judge their satisfaction levels? And we started with that. That's the first thing I told you, and you said that wasn't good.
Well, no, you would use patient surveys of how they feel about the treatment they receive, not how the general public feels about Medicare as an abstract program.
I'm talking about Medicare in terms of the people who are on Medicare. All the polling of people who are on Medicare give it high marks. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to do with the treatment because the treatment they're getting from private doctors. Medicare is just the insurance. You know that, right?
Right.
Right. So I think I could go in and sell people on the idea that a single-payer healthcare system is the way we should go, Medicare for all. And in fact, the Medicare for all that that Bernie, for instance, is offering is actually even better and is, I think, going to be appreciated by people even more than the Medicare that exists now.
Okay. How would that work with the $22 trillion debt that we have?
I don't know. How does the tax cuts work with the debt? How does our military
Pretty
budget work
poorly.
with the debt?
When you don't cut spending, and neither the Republicans nor Democrats have any interest in cutting spending, and you continue to spend more than you take in tax receipts, it doesn't really work.
Why? What's not working?
I mean, we're putting our children and grandchildren into debt.
Why?
Is that sustainable?
Yes. It is sustainable.
How
In
do
fact,
you sustain that?
No. Dude, this is the chair of the Libertarian Party. This is the former chair? Maybe the current chair? I don't know. I could not give a fuck less about the Libertarian Party. But, no, this is the wrong answer. Okay, as the government debt increases, we cannot afford to pay interest on that debt. And so we artificially press the interest rate down. That's how this works. So right now the Fed is keeping interest rates at 0. But then no one wants to buy the bonds at a 0% interest rate, especially if they start monetizing debt and inflation starts to pick up. So what happens is the Fed starts having to monetize more and more of that debt. The Federal Reserve starts to have to directly print the money to buy the bonds that the government is producing to pay for the new spending. Okay, is everyone with me so far? You've got... Do I have paint on this thing? Yeah. Okay. So let's do this. I'm going to tell you guys, if you call yourself libertarian, if you whatever, even if you don't, everyone needs to know how this works. Like, this is the most ridiculous. This guy not knowing how this works is absolutely insane. Okay. Here we go. We got Gov. And we've got Fed. Okay? The Fed prints dollars. Currency. The government prints bonds. Okay? The government wants to sell these bonds to China or Europe or, you know, whoever, anyone, investors, rich guy. Right? This is who we want buying the debt. Okay? But these guys are only going to buy the debt if it pays an interest rate. So while the interest rates are at 22%, everyone wants these bonds. Right? So we sell it to them. So they give us their money. And then the government can spend that money. But the government controls interest rates on these bonds. It says how much they're going to pay in interest. And so all of a sudden, if all these people go, yo, you're paying 3% interest, and inflation is 5%, then they say, fuck you. And they stop buying the bonds. Okay, if they stop buying the bonds, but the government doesn't stop spending the money, then guess where they need to get the money? Well, they have to start selling the bonds to the Fed. And the Fed just prints new money to buy the bonds. Okay? Now, the Fed controls the rates, right? They're the rate controllers. And so as this government debt goes up and up and up and up, then the interest rate has to stay lower and lower and lower and lower, because to pay a high interest rate on a ton of debt takes a lot more tax money than paying a ton of interest on a small amount of debt. So they have to keep bringing the bonds down, down, lower, 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 lower. But the more they bring bonds lower and the more money the Fed is printing to buy the bonds, the less anyone else wants to buy the bonds, because the bonds are a shittier investment. Okay. There you go. So what happens is, let's go 2020 percentage of bonds bought by Federal Reserve. Okay, let's see. Well, I shouldn't say bonds. I should say treasuries. Which, for anyone who doesn't know, a treasury is the bond that the government prints. Okay, who bought the $4.7 billion securities added since March 2020 to the incredibly spiking U.S. national debt? Okay? National debt. Boom, boom, boom. Japan and China's holdings. Japan and China's holdings. Foreigners. U.S. government debt held by the Fed. You see what's happening here in 2020 when we started printing all this money? Look, it goes way up. It was already going up because our debt was already getting super high, but now it's going berserko. Okay? So the Fed's buying all the bonds because no one wants them. And the government does a bunch of fucked up shit to force people to buy bonds. So they say if you want to have a money market fund, you have to hold government bonds. They say Social Security has to hold government bonds, which that makes no sense at all in the first place. Because, okay, so the Social Security Trust Fund, if anyone ever talks about the Social Security Trust Fund, that the government writes itself a check and puts it in a box and calls it an asset. I mean, that's what it is. But it's 100% government debt. But what you get... So Shadow Stats continues to track inflation the same way they used to before they changed it in the 1980s. So they actually buy the same basket of goods every month, and they track the inflation rate. So inflation. So you can see here, this down here is inflation. You see where it jumps out in the 1980s? This is where they changed. So 1983 or whatever, they changed how they tracked it. They started saying, oh, because your cell phones got better, inflation wasn't really so bad, or because your TVs got better. But if you actually take like rent, housing, transportation, energy, just the same normal thing that people buy, if you take the average monthly expenses of the average American and you purchase it once a month, and these are the actual inflation numbers in the blue, right? So 1980 based inflation. This is how the Fed used to track inflation. So you can see before 1983, they tracked on top of each other perfectly. So look, the red is what the Federal Reserve claims inflation is. And so look, you get 9-10% a year of inflation. And then the government lies and says it's 2% down here, and they put you in higher tax brackets, your rent costs more and more, buying a car costs more and more, your insurance goes up and up, everything goes up in cost and makes life like impossible to live. This is why we have to stop doing what we're doing. It's not whatever the fuck this guy was about to say. If you want people to see you as a relatively not, if you want people to see you with a functional IQ, you have to understand this process. So the more the government prints bonds, the more it spends money it's not taking in, and the more it holds interest rates down low, the less anyone else wants to buy the bonds, the more money, the more new currency we have to issue in order to pay the bonds, and the higher inflation is, the more expensive it becomes to live. That's the problem with government debt. It's not we're putting our grandkids, we're doing this, it's my rent has gone up too much in the last 3 years. It's everything is too expensive. The cost of living is too high. And there's a huge incentive for the richest people who lobby the government the most to want this process to happen, because the higher this inflation gets, that money goes into assets. So you get crazy, crazy stock market and real estate here. So guess what? If the stock market and real estate and everything is going up like berserko land, then guess who gets rich? Everyone who already owns all the stocks in the real estate. Let's see. Okay, Case-Shiller Home Price Index. Look at this, from 1990. This is what happens. Okay, the reason the government cannot spend like this, the reason we can't keep going into more and more debt is because we can't buy houses, we can't buy food, we can't buy stocks, we can't buy anything because it just gets too fucking expensive, right? And average wages don't go up like this. Dude, I want a graph. Come on. Okay, so see how this is going up linear? It's going up fairly consistently. Look, it's like a little box every time. Your rise over run is basically 1. But these things, the cost of your housing, the cost of stocks, this is all going up exponentially. This is all going up with the printing of money, but your wages don't keep up. This is the problem with government debt.
Well, I mean, it's easy. The debt, we're a sovereign nation. We can print our own currency. The debt that we owe is really just to ourselves. We gave trillions of dollars to the banks. I didn't agree with it, but we did it. Trillions of dollars to the banks, and we just wiped it off the balance sheets.
Doug!
It's gone.
Oh my God, so he's literally... So Sam knows what I just explained. He just doesn't give a fuck. He's like, oh, throw him a new minimum wage every once in a while. They'll be fine. They'll be fine with that.
Okay. So what happens when we just print our way out of this? What does that look like to you?
Well, we wouldn't necessarily print our way out of it. We would just erase the debt. But to the extent that we print our way out of it,
so
you cannot have.
On our debt.
You're worried about inflation.
What happens then?
You're worried about inflation. And if
do you have an example of another country that's defaulted on its sovereign debt, and what happened to them?
We're not going to default on our sovereign debt.
Okay.
We owe it to ourselves. We're not going to default.
We don't owe it to ourselves. We have bondholders that hold treasury notes that are separate from the
I understand.
government.
The vast majority of those are owned by the U.S. government.
I thought the majority was owned by China, but
really?
Let's assume.
Let's look.
Dude, this is the chairman of the This is the chairman of the Libertarian Party. No, the government doesn't own it. The Fed does. This is separate from the government. It's an independent entity. It is not the government. It prints the money. It's the government's bank. Okay, the U.S. government doesn't own the bonds. The Federal Reserve does. And the majority of our debt is not held by China. I wish it was.
Look that up.
I'm
Hold
pretty
on.
sure China's the holder of most of our sovereign debt.
Really? Come on now. You're the chairman of a major U.S. policy. Matt, would you Google for us who owns U.S. debt? Put it up there. I would say China, the last I recall, was somewhere, I don't know, around maybe 9-10%. Foreign investors own 30%. U.S. government owns 30%. Wait, what's that? Roll up there. Federal Reserve owns 11%. U.S. investors own 30%. So we have China, assuming China is the biggest holder of our debt. It's not going to be more than like 10, 15%. So the 30%, the 5.73 trillion held by the U.S. government, well, guess what? U.S. government's going to be fine. We can print our own money, so we don't need the money that we owe ourselves. We've borrowed.
Okay. How did that work for Argentina or Venezuela?
How did what work for Argentina and Venezuela?
Well, Venezuela inflating your way out of your sovereign
Well, we're not
debt,
inflating our way out of sovereign debt.
On it.
We're not inflating our way out of it. We could just write it off.
Okay.
You're not comparing the economy of Venezuela to the economy of the United States, are you?
No, I'm asking you the question.
Where would Venezuela fit in the United States? Which one of the
states?
states?
What do you think is the outcome that we get if we print our way out of it?
I've already told you what the outcome is.
Or default on
Nicholas,
it? What happens to the country and the people who live here?
Nicholas, I told you what happens. I want everybody who thinks that what I'm talking about is not accurate and what Nicholas is saying is accurate to Google QE 1, 2, and 3 and look for inflationary fears.
Exactly. Here's the point. Sam Seder says nothing happened. Nothing at all. Okay, this happened. This happened. This has been happening. You can see it increased dramatically after the dot-com bubble. And we just haven't gone down. If you don't already own a home, a retirement account filled with stocks, if you haven't purchased all the major assets of your life already, you cannot survive 9% a year inflation. Okay, this happened. This didn't not happen because the government claims that the actual numbers are down here. And anyone who is young enough to have not purchased all their anyone who is too young to have already purchased all their assets in the 1980s is going to know that inflation isn't what the government claims. It is the shadow stats number. It is the actual basket of currencies. The current CPI is such a load of shit. Like, yeah, they don't include, it's not relative to, no one cares about being able to get a better iPhone for less money or a better TV. We need like rent, food, medical care, education. And so everything they downplay in these official numbers are the things that are necessary for life. And so this did happen. Sam Seder's absolutely wrong about that. The example for why we cannot keep printing money like this is the United States, is what happened after quantitative easing.
Because I sat on a stage, on a TV stage with David Stockman. You know who he is, right? Reagan's office management budget. One of these guys, like these third way type of guys, who said that he said the exact same thing that you did almost 10 years ago in the wake of the QE, the quantitative easing one. That we were going to head for Weimar, and guess what happened? Nothing. Trillions of dollars we gave the banks, and then we just burnt it off. Just said, fine, keep it. We just trade the money back and forth.
What happens when we can't control the interest rate?
We can control the interest rate. The Federal Reserve controls the interest rates.
Well, the Federal Reserve can set a nominal interbank rate. What happens when the bond market refuses to respect the interest rate?
What are they going to do? Where are these bondholders going to go? Venezuela?
Probably either the euro or the renminbi.
I'm sorry, the euro? Are you aware of what's going on right now in Europe?
I am.
Okay.
Hey everyone, so I have been seeing progressive officials around the world do this challenge where we try to squeeze in all of the...
So you think that the bondholders are going to say, at what point do you anticipate this happening? I mean, if what you're saying...
It's advancing because the president's throwing us into a trade war with a bunch of tariffs.
Well, wait a second.
So, our foreign buyers are shifting to other countries.
Your theory...
When they shift to other countries, they're going to start marking the market in different currencies that are not the dollar,
right,
which then lowers our buying power.
I had the same conversation with people
control the interest rates.
10 years ago. Nicholas,
okay.
Let me ask you this.
Hey, I see your chat. You're right. I only watch like far left and far right stuff because I don't watch libertarian videos because it's pointless. I already agree with most of it. But yeah, I mean, if you just Google inflation versus government claims, I mean, why real inflation is higher than the government reports, how inflation are, you know, if you want to know the real rate of inflation, don't look at the government's measurements. So if you go to Shadow Stats, you can get real inflation numbers, real consumer inflation numbers. So the red line is what the government claims inflation is. The blue line is where they continued to track inflation based on the method that the government used to use before 1983. Yeah, well, honestly, if they just printed a ton of money and like blew out the whole system, then maybe that gets me back to my gold standard better than any politician could. So maybe we should vote for AOC. I don't know, but yeah, Sam Seder is just completely wrong in this. Or he's using as his example. He's using the United States after 2008, and that's a perfect example of why we cannot continue to do this, because it just becomes impossible to live. Everyone's arguing for like $15 minimum wage. We need a $15 minimum wage, but $15 doesn't mean anything. Like $15 is relative to what you can purchase for $15. So if a McDonald's cheeseburger costs $60, then who cares if you get a $15 minimum wage? Then you need a $300 minimum wage. Like, a number in dollars means nothing. It's what you can purchase with that money. And if we keep printing like we've been printing, like every young person who doesn't already own all their major assets already knows this. They know that it's just more and more impossible. The stock market goes up 30% a year. Houses go up 20% a year. Our wages don't go up at the same rate. So this is what happens. And the rich who already own all their major assets get the benefit of all their assets going up in price super quick. And other people can't get into the game, can't purchase their first home, can't fill a retirement account with, stock that actually pays a dividend, or bonds that actually have a real interest rate. So Sam's whole argument, I'm embarrassed for this libertarian dude. Like, I cannot believe this guy is the chairman of the Libertarian Party. Like, the Libertarian Party is just such a joke. It's so pathetic that this guy cannot formulate an argument. But yeah, Sam's argument is backwards.
How much are bonds worth now? What are the interest rates that we're having to pay to borrow money now? Have they skyrocketed?
I mean, the T-bill rate, I think, is down into the 2%. It's
now,
tiny. It's
are these bond buyers complete idiots? Because if what you're saying is the case, if we've got this massive debt that is going to challenge us, and we can actually talk about how expensive Medicare for all will be, because it's not nearly going to be as expensive, I think, as you anticipate. But if it was the case that these bondholders were worried about it, wouldn't the interest rates go up, according to your theory?
Well, sort of. The bond price goes.
Interest rates are controlled by the Fed funds rate. The Fed gets to choose the interest rate the government debt pays, and no one is buying it. The only person buying the treasuries right now as they're issued is the Fed. They have to print money to buy them. No, China's not buying them. Rich people aren't buying them. No one's buying bonds at 0% interest when inflation is 8%. No one's dumb enough to do that. That's why the Fed has to buy all the bonds. Treasuries purchased by Fed. Okay. When the Fed buys treasuries, it means they're just printing cash. They're just printing it. On net, the Fed has absorbed nearly all new COVID debt. No one is buying the bonds. They're just printing the money. The government is issuing the bonds, and the Fed is just printing the cash to buy it, because no one wants 0% bonds. And this is after the government forced every bank to hold treasuries. This is after the government forced the Social Security Trust Fund to hold treasuries. This is after the government forced money market funds to only hold treasuries. And still, no one will buy the damn bonds. They just have to print the money.
Down to reflect the risk, but
Right.
yes, the perceived or the felt interest rates through the economy would go up.
Right. And why isn't that happening according to your theory?
Well, it's not happening because of the stuff that you're talking about. As the government continues to ignore the debt ceiling and print more money or issue more bonds and keep selling more debt, it pumps money into the economy, which then allows them to keep the interest rates low. You can do that for a long time. I mean,
When can you
drink
stop
for
doing
a long
that?
time and
When
not
do you
have a
have to-
hangover
when do you have to
until
stop?
you stop drinking.
Right. But when do you have to stop? Why should we stop drinking?
I would say take a look at what happened.
You have to stop doing it when the young people who can't buy assets get so pissed off that they're in the streets burning shit down. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
And to Argentina.
We're not Argentina. We have control
I'm aware
over.
of it.
We have control over our currency. We're not.
It's even worse. If we do what Argentina did, then guess what? We're the world reserve currency, so everyone's going to go down with our sinking ship. Everybody. I don't even know where you would go. Maybe Singapore?
Not tied to any one natural resource to provide our.
But is that permanent? Is the currency control permanent, where we can issue sovereign debt and people will want to buy it?
I don't know.
Is that
I mean,
situation?
I have a feeling climate change is going to be a much bigger problem than our preeminence as a currency failing is going to be. Particularly as I look around now, bond holders agree with me, because otherwise you would see a commensurate rise in what they require to take on more risk, but they don't. So, who are you going to believe? The people who are actually in the business of buying U.S. debt, or you? But let's change for let's change for a second for a moment.
Shift.
Yeah, let's shift. Medicare for all. You're afraid that it's going to cost how much?
It's going to cost a lot. I mean, when you have a single payer for a service, you have no competition in that market, which is going to raise the cost of provisioning the care. You get some economies of scale for being a large buyer, but there's no competitive pressure to do anything better.
Are you aware of the term of monopsony?
Yes, I'm aware of the term of monopsony.
Okay, explain to people what that is.
A monopsony is when you have one buyer of a good or a service in the market. So only one group or organization is the sole buyer of the product.
Correct. And what does that buyer have? What kind of power do they have in terms of the cost of things?
Theoretically, they have the power to set what price they will pay because they're the only buyer. The normal supply and demand stuff doesn't work exactly right. What happens instead is you have a steep drop from a willingness to provide the service to the single buyer at a dictated price to I'm not willing to even participate in the market anymore because the single buyer won't pay me enough. So what you end up happening is the problem you get with a single payer system.
So wait, let me just explain to people.
Shortages and scarcity. Because if the single buyer says, my price is going to be so low, doctors get out of the market.
Right.
Or
okay. So just to be clear,
gets out of the market.
Just to be clear, a single payer system will actually can actually control costs more, but the danger is that they'll control costs in such a way that it won't be profitable enough for doctors to be doctors. Right? That's what you're suggesting.
Right.
So the real
danger,
danger,
Canada or the National Health Service in Britain, and you see some of these effects.
The National Health Service in Britain is like the VA.
Right.
You're conflating two different things. Because the National Health Service is actually all the doctors.
If you say Medicare for all, then it isn't.
No.
Right.
Nicholas, you're making a very, very severe error of a category error.
Okay. Help me understand.
Okay. In Britain, under the National Health Service, if you're a doctor, you're an employee of the government. Everyone around you is an employee of the government. In a single payer healthcare system, the doctors all work for either the hospital or themselves, but they get checks from the insurance company. In this instance, the insurance company is the U.S. government.
So why would you keep the insurance model if you're trying to move to a single payer system?
I think maybe
that's
ultimately
what Obama did, which was stupid. You managed to take the worst of big health insurance companies, padding their bills and third-party payer and all of the disincentives there, and combine it with a mandate that, forced everybody to buy this crappy product. It's the worst of both worlds.
Well, the product got better.
Health economist will tell you that.
The product well, that's not true. I've talked to a lot of health economists. But the product got better because of basically a minimum standard for what constituted health insurance. I would agree with you. It was a bad way.
The product got worse.
We shouldn't subsidize.
As a business owner who had to buy health insurance for my employees, the product got significantly worse to the point where the only coverage that was affordable had such a high deductible that it wasn't really insurance at all for anything other than catastrophic care. And that's why it was so unpopular.
You had no rescission.
Insurance companies sold crappy insurance.
It's more popular. It's actually got a more than 50% approval rating now. But putting that aside for a moment, we know that there's no such thing as rescission anymore. There's no lifetime caps. We know that you can't be that all makes it actual.
That's
insurance.
why the insurers get out of the market. That's why I lost my insurer from year to year.
Indeed, right. Which is why you and I agree on this. The only good part about that was the expansion of Medicaid. This is why we need to go to a single payer. And then your fear is we're going to have doctors who are going to get out of the business because it's not going to be profitable enough for them.
Okay, yeah, it's sad. It's sad that a chair of the Libertarian Party cannot formulate an argument. But it is what it is.